Hello and welcome to the channel All This Is Knowledge, and I am your host. Hello and welcome to the third episode in this 4-part series on the evolution and history of flight. Now in this episode, we will explore man's efforts to create heavier than air devices. Now these devices that did not rely on hot air or hydrogen to fly, but instead relied on a power source, an engine, to help them take off and to stay aloft. So follow me and watch the story unravel. In the early episodes, we discovered that lighter than air devices were created between the late 18th century and the early 20th century. And these lighter than air devices were eventually abandoned in favor of heavier than air devices. What is really interesting is that the efforts to create lighter than air devices and heavier than air devices had begun around the same time in the early 19th century. Let's rewind the clock to the early 1800s and discover the efforts. Remember the good old glider, the one that we fly for recreation in today's world? We have British aviator Sir George Cayley to thank for. Now, Sir George Cayley designed and built the first fixed-wing glider as early as the year 1804. When Leonardo da Vinci had created his ornithopter, he had made the flapping wing the source of lift as well as forward propulsion, basing his design on how birds fly. But Sir George Cayley believed otherwise. He was the first to propose that the engine would propel the aircraft in the future, and those wings should be shaped in such a way to create lift. Now, the only engine that existed during Cayley's time was the steam engine, which wasn't small and light enough to fit in an airplane. Therefore, although Cayley had designed a plane, he did not have an engine to propel the aircraft. Eventually, what he flew was a glider, a plane without an engine. Now, Cayley flew his gliders in the late 1840s and early 1850s and carried the first passenger, a little boy, aboard one of the short flights. Between early innovation and its final culmination lies the long and dusty plain of trial and error. In the mid-1800s, various innovators grappled with the forces of thrust and lift. William Samuel Henson added to Cayley's work and designed the first powered monoplane aircraft that was the stepping stone between Cayley's early design and the planes that we fly today. Now, monoplanes have a single set of wings as opposed to the biplanes of the early 20th century, which had two sets of wings stacked on top of each other on either side. But Henson's monoplane had a problem. It was steam powered, and the steam engine was extremely heavy, and it was powered by coal. Imagine being laden with coal on an airframe that was made of wood. There is no way the wooden aircraft could have carried all that weight. Now, when Henson eventually built a scale model of his aircraft, it didn't fly because of the heavy weight of the engine. Now, many inventors and aviation enthusiasts made incremental contributions, such as the German Otto Lilienthal, who not only used body weight to control the flight of his gliders, but painstakingly recorded the flight data of his wing designs and photographed his flights. His gliders were the precursors to the hand gliders of the modern era. Now, heavier than air manned flight was inches away. Thanks to Henson's and Otto Lilienthal's work on aircraft design, there was just enough literature and data to create an enduring aircraft design. But enduring flight still needed two elements. First, to move from steam-powered engines towards a robust petrol-powered engine. And second, to master the art of control in the air. The Wright brothers solved both the problems. The family owned printing presses and manufactured bicycles. But the Wright family excelled not just in business, but as machinists. It had designed and constructed much of the machinery for both the printing press and the bicycle factory. Now the brothers, Wilbur and Orville Wright, inherited the brilliance, which came to the fore when they designed an internal combustion engine to power the machinery at the bicycle factory. Excuse me, gentlemen, I need to talk to my audience. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Let me tell you a secret. The Wright brothers were intrigued by flight and turned their attention to aircraft design.
Their collective experience as machinists helped them to figure out how to design wings for flight and to create a light internal combustion engine to power their aircraft. For 3 painfully long years at Kitty Hawk in North Carolina, the two brothers perfected their aircraft design. The plane that they worked on was called the Wright Flyer. They made the wings long and narrow to help the aircraft climb up. To improve control, the Wright brothers replaced the fixed tail with a movable rudder, which with the long and narrow wings allowed the Wright Flyer to make smooth, banked turns. Now all the plane needed was a sturdy engine. With experience of having successfully built an engine for the bicycle factory, the brothers built a single-cylinder petrol engine that cranked out 12 horsepower. Their plane, the Wright Flyer, had a wingspan of 40 feet. And then on 17th of December 1903, at the Kill Devil Hills near Kitty Hawk, Ohio, USA, the two brothers made history as Orville Wright steered the Flyer over 120 feet and took about 12 seconds to do so. This was humanity's first successful, controlled, powered and manned heavier-than-air flight. The Wright brothers had unleashed a new era in the race to fly. By 1909, Europe overtook the United States in airplane design, and pioneers such as Louis Blériot flew his Type 11 monoplane across the English Channel. By the First World War, airplanes were being used for spying on enemy territory. As the war progressed and became more intense, guns were fitted on the front of the planes, and so commenced the era of top fights, or air combat, where airplanes battled against each other in the skies. Ace fighter pilots became the knights of modern warfare. The German pilot, the Red Baron, was one of the deadliest of them all. The Red Baron shot down a record 80 planes from his Fokker triplane. Of course, compared to today's technology, air combat during the First World War was primitive, and in the early stages of the war, pilots even shot at each other with pistols and threw grenades mid-air. Knowledge time! As the First World War raged in Europe, commercial and civil aviation were taking birth. The founders of aircraft manufacturers such as Boeing, Lockheed, Douglas Aircraft Company lent their names to the respective companies, and this is the point in history when these aviation entrepreneurs turned air transport into a profitable business. Imagine sitting or lying down in a barn and watching daredevil pilots launch into the air in the airplanes, walk on the wings mid-air, and dive and loop their planes dangerously at low altitudes. Called the barnstormers, these daredevil pilots were all from the military, and some pilots were even women. These acrobatic performances were held at barns, where planes would take off from and land on. Now these barnstormers entertained crowds just as gladiators did in early recorded history. Now these shows were the ancestors to the modern airship. As airplanes became more sophisticated, the daring of the air aces became more audacious. In the year 1919, a $25,000 award was announced for anyone daring enough to successfully fly across the Atlantic Ocean non-stop from New York to Paris. Two amazing people etched their names into aviation lore when they flew over the Atlantic, and on whom was created endless Hollywood movies. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh took off in his custom-made airplane called the Spirit of St. Louis and flew non-stop for 23.5 hours across 310 miles to France without sleep. It gets even more astounding. Lindbergh removed the windshield of his plane to improve the center of gravity and for self-protection, and instead relied upon a periscope to see ahead. Gosh! The other was the famous Amelia Earhart, who crossed the Atlantic in 1932. However, she attempted a larger record of circumnavigating the world in an aircraft in 1937, but her plane disappeared over the Pacific Ocean during the attempt. She remains an enigmatic and inspiring figure till today. Just as the world was picking up the pieces from the First World War, Nazi Germany was drawing up plans that were to embroil the world in another intercontinental war. In our next and final episode in our 4-part series on the history and evolution of flight, we will witness the birth of the jet age, its impact on the World War, and watch flight develop way faster than it ever had. See you in a bit. So I truly hope you enjoy the content, you learned a little. Please subscribe to my channel, like the video, share the love, and adios and namaste until the next video. Cheers, bye.